Quite apart from the widely reported harassment of African citizens trying to cross the Ukrainian borders and the shockingly racist treatment of black people at the onset of the war in Ukraine, it is no longer news that African and Caribbean countries, like other developing countries, have continued to suffer gravely as a result of the war. Their suffering is especially because of the shortage in food supplies and increases in food prices that skyrocketed as soon as the Ukrainian conflict began. The situation has only continued to worsen each passing day as the war in Ukraine has seriously disrupted the global food supply chain that has left most countries in the developing world so dependent on producers of food in the developed world. One of the major questions that we should ask ourselves is, why should so many countries be made dependent on a few others for fertilizers and even food? Welcome to the Sankofa Pan-African series. Please support us through Patreon and by buying me coffee. Subscribe to this channel and please turn on your notification buttons so you know when we have new episodes, and share our videos with your contacts. Also, make time to check out our new website, sankofastorybooks.com, for history, Afrocentric stories, and other resources for children. Well, Africa and the Caribbean countries' dependence on Ukraine and Russia are examples of how the machinations of the economic north and programs imposed by the IMF and WTO have made the agricultural sectors in poorer countries of the global south vulnerable to foreign competition. The food shortages that we're facing now, simply because two countries in Europe are at war, prove that the industrialized, globalized, corporate-led food system was designed to keep us dependent, and it is destroying us. Unfortunately, the reasons behind this warped global economic system that has left so many of us starving because our countries are dependent on Russia and Ukraine for food is beyond the scope of this episode. My focus here is to draw attention to what needs to be done to stem the level of starvation caused by the Russian-Ukrainian war and the humanitarian crisis caused by climate change, which people are facing in Africa, the Caribbean, and other developing parts of the world. To start with, governments in Africa and the Caribbean need to take policy measures to subsidize food accessibility to low-income people. They're the ones who are most affected by the current food crisis. Our governments also need to collectively resist any pressure to impose austerity policies and cuts to public spending, which is usually what the IMF keeps recommending in situations like this. People who are facing starvation need more public service, not austerity measures. Governments in the economic south also need to focus on increasing social safety nets and other measures to improve the income of their citizens so they can cope with the increasing food prices. One of the things that the war in Ukraine should teach us is that we must be more deliberate in investing in building national food reserves to act as buffers and reduce our vulnerability to international food shortages and price hikes. One of the ways to reduce dependence on imported food is by supporting smallholder farmers. Our governments need to encourage and support them to use sustainable agroecological approaches to farming that will improve soil fertility for crop production. This will make them less dependent on imported, expensive, fossil fuel chemical fertilizers. It is also necessary to promote the manufacture of goods instead of exporting raw materials and other valuable resources, which are turned into goods that we then import at exorbitant prices. If we promote manufacture, we will create jobs and reduce dependence on imports. However, these recommendations cannot be achieved by any one country alone or even any single region. There needs to be stronger economic and political cooperation between Africa and the Caribbean countries. Working together, Africa and the Caribbean governments, in collaboration with other countries in the economic south, will also be more effective in demanding climate justice, because the current suffering caused by the war in Ukraine is only a tip of the iceberg. Climate change is expected to drive another 122 more million people into poverty by 2030. It's just round the corner. But if we prepare now, we'll be able to forestall some of the hardships that climate change is expected to bring. Thanks for watching. Please support us through Patreon and by buying me coffee so we can continue to bring you this series. Subscribe, turn on your notification buttons, and share our videos with all your contacts. Also, please keep your comments coming, and remember to check out our new website, sankofastorybooks.com, for history, Afrocentric stories, and other resources for our children.